Okay, let's go ahead and get ourselves started again. We're going to move on to thinking about how we actually move from just these shaded and realistic views with the lighting and the materials that we set up to actually rendering to create the photorealistic views that we might want to use to share our designs. So let's kind of take a look at how we can render these 3D views. You can have a choice. You can actually render things in the Revit application, which has the advantage of sort of being right on your machine, but takes a little while to do sometimes versus rendering in the cloud, which for very high quality renderings, which may take a little bit of time, has the advantage of being able to offload it from your machine so you can kind of keep on working. And we're going to look at both ways. An important thing to keep in mind about renderings, though, is that they're static snapshots, and that as we create a rendering, once we create a rendering, it's no longer dynamic, where these other views, the realistic views, the shaded views, as the model keeps on changing, will update. Renderings are really just a snapshot at that point in time. They won't be updated. But let's go ahead and think about how we can create these renderings, because it's a great way to share your design ideas. So it all starts with having a 3D view. I usually render my camera views because they have that nice realistic perspective. And let's start with the exterior view. The exterior view is a really easy one because at some level, it's largely controlled by the lighting from the sun. And that's relatively easy for you to set and not have to worry about. The sun's just a very bright object, so it makes most renderings look pretty good. So this all started with, let's go through and set the sun settings for the view. So making sure that the sun settings are appropriate as well as the materials. I have mine set up for Los Angeles at about 8 in the morning here, kind of in February. Okay, you can sort of see approximately what that sun is like. Oh, let me make it a little bit later in the day, like at 11 in the morning. See, okay. You can sort of see where the shadows are coming across right now. Okay, great. If I would now like to sort of see the effect of the sun on the building, okay, what I can do is choose the render tool. And on the render tool, you have a lot of different choices here. The most important ones to focus are the draft setting, or the quality setting. Right now it's currently set to draft, which is very quick but lower quality, all the way up to best, but let's kind of keep it very low right now, because as we're testing, here's the big important point. As you're testing, you often want to sort of do things quickly and just sort of see what the impact is. And then after you sort of are sure the settings are about right, then you can move up to a higher quality. You can decide whether you want to have a low resolution that is appropriate for the screen or a higher resolution appropriate for a printer. I'm going to stay to screen resolution now, especially as we're just testing. We have our sun scheme. I'll use the exterior sun. We have the whole notion of really what will be in the background, some clouds, some sort of sky, or we could actually put an image or a gradient back there. I'll just go ahead and use clouds for right now. Exposure will adjust later. So we are ready to run this rendering and see how things are, confirm that the sun is good, that the materials are good. Let's give it a run. Now, as it's working, you'll see that what it does is it starts by just considering the lights, kind of the overall lighting model. It's trying to figure out how much light's hitting each of those different surfaces. And after it figures out the lighting, it'll go through and then just really adjust all the materials images so they have the right appearance relative to the light that's being cast on that surface, the shadows, things like that. Now, as it works, it's kind of continuing to go through cycles, iteratively getting a little finer. Draft, again, is okay for sort of understanding things. My material doesn't quite look quite good as good as I'd like it over here on the building, but you can sort of see where the shadows are right now. And I'm not sure I like that time of day, so I'm going to shift over a little bit to slightly later in the day, or earlier in the day, so I get a little bit more sun. Let's do it about 9 in the morning. We'll have a different sort of shadow scheme. Again, I'll re-render that. But again, just do this very iteratively. Kind of come to the point where you're happy with kind of sun that's on the building. That's a little bit better. The building's a little bit brighter on the front. That's looking pretty good. Okay, now if you're confident that this is actually a pretty good set of settings, what you can do is either stop it as soon as you're happy with the quality that you have right now and save that rendering. Let me do that for right now. I'm going to stop that right now. Oops. I said I was going to stop that right now. Okay. I'm going to actually turn that up just a little bit higher. Now you can turn this up even higher still for yourself, but for our demonstration, we'll just turn it up to medium, get a little bit better. You're going to find that this actually creates a slightly higher quality resolution, the rendering. The kind of way the lighting is handled, how much lighting bounces off the different surfaces is computed to a little finer detail. Also, just the smoothness of the different surfaces around some of the diagonal edges, some of the kind of raster processing there. It just handles, it takes it to just a finer resolution so you get a better looking rendering. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. Kind of just moving its way on through. Boy, that red panel is bright. We can decide whether we want to tone that down a little bit. But again, you could typically just let this run the entire way, or I'm kind of happy with where it is right now. So I'm just going to let it stop right now for our purposes. That's fine enough for what I want to capture and share. So what I can do now is save this rendering. I can save it to my project. It'll be an image here. Give it a view. It now shows up over here in the project tree, project browser tree. Notice it is available, but it is a static image. So remember that it's not going to change itself or update itself if we do change the model. So watch out for that. Another thing we can do is we can export it. If you'd like to just sort of have it externally as a JPEG or as a PNG or just something that's available, you know, from another file, we can go through and export the JPEG there. Okay, but if we want to get back to the model, we can say show the model. We're ready to go. So exterior rendering is actually pretty easy. Just as long as you have the lighting and the material set right, you'll tend to be just fine. Let's switch over to another type of view, the interior view, which is definitely much more subtle about how we handle these. So you can sort of see we have some lighting set up here right now. That's not too awfully bad looking. Oh, what do I want to do over here? Let's adjust the rendering settings here. I'm going to change to a slightly different time. I'll say interior. Let's start with this with the sun settings. Again, I'm going to go interior. Let me just go to change to interior. I'm going to say affect or consider the sun only. Oh, I'll bring that down to like 8 in the morning so you can sort of see that a little bit better. Okay, here. Okay, we sort of see the effect right there, the sun coming across. That's not too awfully bad. Let's go ahead and do our rendering now. So what I'm going to do is come to the render dialog again. We got that interior sun only. That's looking good. The sky there, that's fine. Let's just do a draft. And this will probably look pretty much okay. Actually, it looks kind of very overexposed right now. Notice we're getting the nice shadows. That part's actually good. It's just the overall light quality looks like just a little bit glary in terms of what's going on. So we can go ahead and adjust that too. That's not looking, well, again, I say that's not looking too bad only because I know I can fix that pretty easily by adjusting the exposure settings. Let's just show you what the effect of that is. So let me stop that right now. Again, the lighting direction's okay. It's just a little bit too bright. I'm going to adjust the exposure. There's so much light coming into this that using the interior exposure settings, it's actually coming through too bright. So I'm going to darken that up a little bit. And that may be a little bit more realistic to what we have in mind. We could also, instead of just adjusting the overall exposure value, we can just, for example, make the highlights darker. That'll just take the brightest areas and darken them down a little bit. So this is probably a little closer to an accurate view of what you'd see at that morning time. And you can see it's actually kind of a nice space. So we could say, okay, let me go through and save that project or that rendering project too. And again, I can turn that up to a higher quality, re-render that, and some of this smoothness. Let's go ahead and try that. Will be a little bit better. Again, once you get to medium, you can get to high, even to best finally. But again, that's going to start taking some time, and that's going to be the issue of where we might want to start sending our renderings to the cloud instead. But once you get the settings set up, the good news is you're ready to go. Okay, let me pause this for just a second. I'm going to see if I can cut out some of that background noise for you. Okay, let's get going again. You can see the rendering sort of progressed a little bit. It's looking pretty good. It's a little bit finer in terms of what's going on. Let me go ahead and stop that. That's fine enough for what we need right now. And again, if we want to, we can adjust those exposure settings just a little bit to kind of fine tune that overall sense of how bright or how dark that is. Okay, looking pretty good. Again, I'll save that to my project. Another version of the interior. Let's kind of just check out the difference there. You might be able to see here comparing the first one. Notice especially right around the edge of these shadows, how grainy it is right in there. Whereas in this newer one at the slightly higher quality, it's a little bit finer. I could take that even finer, but you can see this is actually a pretty nice space the way we have it set up so far. Okay, let's get to the couple variations of lighting that really make it sort of very interesting. And that is either just sort of a view where we're depending upon the artificial lights, or more importantly, kind of nighttime views that depend on artificial lights, because that's when really we're dependent upon them. And let's see if we can make sense of that. Okay, so for doing a nighttime rendering, let's again switch over to the model view. Now in this model, I really only have a couple of different lights in here. So let me go ahead and kind of add another light in here just so I have a little bit more to work with. I'm going to go and let's see if I can bring in another lighting fixture. Let me see if I even have it in there. Insert, actually architecture, place a component. I have a specific modern lamp that I like to use. Let's see if it's in here. Nope. Not seeing it, so let's go ahead and load that in. Okay, we're going to go out to, let's go to our Imperial Library. We can bring in some lighting. How about, we'll just go for, like an uplight. There's a studio light, spotlight. I'm looking for like a floor lamp, kind of like a, that's just a regular one. We'll just go for one of these torchieres. They were very popular at one point. We'll zoom on in there. Kind of place it over here next to the sofa area. Great, that might cast a little more light. Those tend to be pretty bright. Let's go back to that 3D view and take a look. Okay, so we're hanging around here. Again, this is not showing the model. That's kind of showing the rendered view. There's that light right now. Let's go ahead and try rendering this. So the idea is we want to try to look at the effect of just having the lights. So we'll say interior artificial lights only, as though it's nighttime. Okay, so for the artificial lights, we have these different lights right now. We have the torchiere, we have the 3 little ceiling lights. Let us try rendering this and see what happens. So again, kind of nighttime. Let's go through and do our render. I'm going to start with a draft view again, just so we can kind of be very quick about this. Now, as you're watching this render, and it's just starting to render, it's considering the effect of those 4 different light sources now. The sun's kind of completely out of the picture right now. And you can sort of see that it's relatively dark. Not to worry though, we have accurate light sources. Let me stop that right now. And we can try adjusting the exposure to sort of pull more light out of those sources. And this is again what your eye would do. As it adjusts to the darker light, you can sort of fill things out there a little bit. It's so bright in that one corner, I may need to go through and add another light to the other side of the room, but be sensible about this. If you find that you're putting a lot of lights in and you're just not getting the lighting effect you want, it's probably not that you don't have enough lights. It's probably more that you just need more exposure. You need to adjust that. So yeah, don't start putting lights everywhere. Yeah, you have common sense about how often lights typically appear in an interior space, so go ahead and use that. Let's go ahead and render that again. I'll do it at a slightly higher quality. That'll bring out more of the light. The light will reflect off of more surfaces. It's a little bit brighter now in terms of getting, you can see we have a little bit of light in the overall space. So we see a little bit more about the space on the right-hand side. That's not looking too bad. Again, I'm cutting these very short. You'd let them run typically, oops, all the way through so you get the full effect of the quality. Let me adjust that exposure. Kind of bring that up just a little bit brighter. That's not too awfully bad. A little bit too bright on the highlights, so I'm going to darken those down a hair. Okay, not too awfully bad. That's pseudo-realistic. If that's feeling good to you, we'll save that away. So we have another version of that. You should give them better names. I'm just actually being pretty sloppy about that right now. But let's try an exterior nighttime view. Same sort of things apply. So if I come out to the exterior and I change the rendering settings, or just go to the render dialog, that might be the easier way to do it. I can again say, let's change the lighting. It can just be exterior artificial only. Let's say we have those artificial lights on, that's fine. Let's go ahead and render that. Now this is looking very dim because for the exterior settings, what tends to happen is it's considering the total range of exposure values that might include the sun, which would be much, much brighter. So you might say, oh, this is a complete disaster, but it's not. We just need to go through and kind of think about how we adjust those exposure settings. So let's go ahead and again, bring those up. Don't go too far. If you go too far, you'll white out the image and you won't see anything. So you can start thinking about how you can kind of create something interesting there. Let me bring the highlights down a little bit so it's not quite as bad that way. But I'm actually going to need a few more lights in this scene to kind of light up the rest of the house. But I think you can see, like nighttime renderings, especially from outside a glazed space, can really be very dramatic and exciting. So kind of think about how you might use those to kind of convey the interesting effects that you want to, sharing your design too. Okay, so that's the basics on rendering within Revit and how we go through and kind of adjust those lighting settings. Next, we're going to look at how we actually can do a lot of this in the cloud just to make things easier. And the good news is you know pretty much everything you already need to know. It's very, very simple to go from here. But go ahead and practice with the rendering engine within Revit since that's available to you at all times. And then we'll learn some more.